talking about Israel, Palestine, always, what does it mean? And many times people question. But I remember at the time of the honey days of Oslo, an Israeli and a Palestinian were traveling together. And the Palestinian wanted to go to the bathroom on the airplane. And then he saw occupied, and he said, there is an Israeli inside. So Shlomo and Adil continued the trip, and when, they went to the, what they call it, visa or whatever, passport control, name, Shlomo, occupation, no, I am for tourism, not occupation. So what do we expect to talk about Israel, Palestine? What do we talk about the situation there? There are the worst of times, and I look always at the best of times. The worst of times, I believe you have been familiar with it, and you have been visiting. Many of you have been in the area a lot and well informed about it. But it seems the situation got worse too. The unilateral actions of the Israeli government is at alarming rate. And the situation politically, as if there is no future, The peace process is not moving. And any kind of peace process needs a kind of jump start now. And the situation is terrible on that level, in the sense you can see the impact of the occupation on every family. You can see that if we talk about statistics, 1/4 to 1/3 of the male population have been in jail since 1967. And 12,000 women have been in jail since 1967. So you can tell that every family suffered from the occupation in terms of jail. But also, nowadays we see how the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, the land occupied in 1967, got smaller and smaller, and the whole West Bank towns becomes like small cantons, Palestines, isolated from each other by either the wall, which is 5 times Berlin Wall in terms of length, and 2 times the Berlin Wall in terms of height. And this wall is not built on the seam line. It is 80% of it is on the Palestinian land, gobbling more land, creating different scenarios there. And we talk about the settlements, that you heard about the settlements a lot, and freezing the settlements, not freezing the settlements, a deal with arms from the United States in support of, and settlements are not frozen except when it snows. And there are 500 Israeli Jewish settlers in the West Bank. Talking about a process to create a different reality on the ground. And when we talk about settlements, we're not talking about illegal buildings. We talk about, the control of the land, the resources. When we talk about the water, here I am gracious to the hands that I sometimes take 2 times a bath. There, 84% of the water is taken by the Israeli side. And many times we pay 4 times the Israeli pay for it. And not always the water is running 24 hours. It comes once every 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So this is really a situation that, tells you about features of the occupation. And when I talk about that, I'm not talking about to be anti-Israeli or asking you to be anti-Israeli. I'm talking about anti-occupation. Because as a Palestinians, we have taken the strategy for two-state solution, to live and let others live, But since Oslo, it seems things are not moving forward, and we thought that the Oslo peace process was a quantum leap that should lead to a qualitative leap toward justice and peace and reconciliation. But it didn't go on that line, didn't go on that path. Unilateral actions are more increased in this area. More kids are put in prison. And there are different checkpoints in the West Bank. And I have no problem to guarantee the security for Israel, but also I believe in inclusive security. Palestinians should enjoy security, and Israelis should enjoy it. There is no security for Israel if the Palestinians are lack of security, and vice versa. And I believe good neighbors make good fences, and not vice versa. The apartheid wall is not creating security. It is a mechanism for gobbling more land. And this is a way to look at it more. And we shouldn't be shy if we call a spade a spade. And we shouldn't be afraid if we are Jewish and have justice point of view to be called self-hating Jew, or if we are not Jewish to be called anti-Semitic. I believe you are anti-Semitic when you are anti-justice. And it is the time to say the things as they are, and to know the truth, and the truth will liberate you in a way or another. So I can go on the ugly face of what's going on, the occupation, what's going on, and many people will say, this is a hopeless case. What are the issues that bring hope? And before going into the issue of hope, what will be possible responses or possible ways to deal with this issue? And nowadays, the Palestinian leadership talks about continuing the dialogue, continuing the peace talks. And whenever we are fed up, we tell the president or the prime minister, we are fed up with the situation. Look what is going on, Our life is not really promising. And he would always say, the response, we need to invest in talks and peace. And I like this strategy of, investing in peace talks that hopefully lead to something. But in the meantime, what will be the responses of the Palestinians if the peace talks will not go? And sometimes such responses will be prepared or, ready after thoughts, after ideas, after strategy, and sometimes you cannot predict it. What are the possible responses? One of them is to dismantle the Palestinian Authority, that President Abbas to resign. And what does it mean? What would happen? And it is easy, some voices to call for resignation of President Abbas, and sometimes President Abbas threatened to resign because, wait a minute, I cannot deliver the good news for the people. I cannot talk about being two-state solution, and we see the West Bank is divided into many cantons. There is no viable Palestinian state. East Jerusalem is separated from the West Bank. Gaza is away. Gaza itself is a bigger prison, and so he felt that there is no future in the peace talks. Although not yet going into that line. Another response we heard from the younger generation talking about third uprising, another intifada. Although we know that the Palestinians, hit the ground. And the situation is very exhausting. But knowing the fact that most of our population are young population, you could say 60% of our population are younger than 30, they will take things, especially when we talk about 18, 19, 20 years old, they say, wait a minute, the older generation have sold it, we will try ourselves the new struggle. And it is easy to start a new struggle, but you are not sure where it will lead you. So is third uprising a solution to end the occupation or not? No one will tell. And where will it lead us? Third one is what the Palestinians more are thinking of, to declare the state. to declare a state and to be recognized by the international community. And there are many voices in Latin America talking about recognizing the state. Europeans are doing more around that. The Americans, on the official level, denied it and wouldn't go in that line, and even send a message to refuse it. But of course, the American people and American groups and peace activists having a different situation. But declaring the state is very important a way also to have a type of nonviolence on the government level. You know, instead of declaring emergency or declaring struggle, you know, they talk about declaring the state. And this is a test to the world in general and the peace movement in the world to assume their collective responsibility. So the Palestinians have been patient enough since 1948, and they have been abiding with the peace processes, the leadership and the people, and even Hamas is always talk about truce with the Israeli side, and they don't see anything in return. So declaring the state is a kind of escalation in a nonviolent way. And this is very important if the declaration of the state will happen, because there will be now more calls for BDS, the boycott, the divestment, and sanctions. And there are lots of argument about this issue. Many people in circles in the United States and Europe say this is anti-Semitic action, or this is another way to destroy Israel. This is some people talking about that. But when we talk about this as a Palestinian who live in the occupied territories, we are challenging the occupation, and I say, yes, we should divest from any company to prolong the occupation. Boycott all the goods that are produced by the Israeli settlement, and have sanctions to get that Israel will come to its senses. I'm not interested in Israel to go to its knees, because we are talking about restorative justice. We like to live, we celebrate life, and we opt for life, and we like to do it. So when we talk about restorative justice, we talk about redressing the wrongs rather than avenging it. And this is very important factor that the world should know as a Palestinian, when we talk about two-state solution, that we recognize Israel. But whether Israel recognized us, what borders, and so on, this is another challenge. And again, this is also addressed to the world community that, wait a minute, we need to move from blame, we need to move from victimhood, from guilt, from pointing the finger to collective responsibility. Because I believe dwelling on victimhood is very suicidal, and blaming is very toxic. We need to assume responsibility altogether. And this will not happen unless the Palestinians continue their struggle non-violently to get rid of the occupation. Occupation is evil. And the pro-justice camp in Israel, which is a ray of hope, although they are small in number, but there's a ray of hope to continue their preventive approach of nonviolence to help Israel to get rid of the occupied territories, because occupation is a burden. And the third party is has very important role, whether at the UN level or as government or people's movement, to help both realize that there is a way out. As a person who has been active in the peace movement for a long time, I used to work on the grassroots level, and I believe in the grassroots. But up till this moment, we haven't seen a change in the Israeli government policy. So we need a pressure on Israel, and it's needed to have multi-track diplomacy, and one of them, the states, to have a pressure on Israel. And since we are talking about the United States, we are talking about the impact that could change, you know, because you are in great power, and great power always associated with a great responsibility. And this is very important because the United States has been spoiling Israel for a long time with all of the taxes, with the arms, with all of that, and I hope that Israel will not endanger the United States' interest by following such a policy. So it is the time now in the United States to exert some pressure to create a different synergy there and to move into the peace talks. Another option, and I wouldn't like that option, is we see a rise of fundamentalism all over. We see it in the Jewish circles, we see it in the Christian circles, we see it in Islamic circles. Myself, I don't believe that I need to gain a seat in heaven or conquer the other enemy. I like to live life before death, as I might believe in life after death, you know? But at the same time, if the situation will not move forward, I see fundamentalism will be there more and more. And the next war will be war of fundamentalism. And it's not healthy for Islam, for Christianity, for Judaism. And we see that more right-wing groups are mushrooming in Israel to call for a Jewish state, whether through the oath of loyalty, you know, as well as different rabbis have different declarations. And this, of course, will feed and the Islamic fundamentalism. I'm not talking about certain groups, but I'm talking more to the right of Hamas and more to the groups in the Arab world and the Muslim world who haven't been able to see good Israeli or good Jew, and talking about like Al-Qaeda or so on. And of course we have the Christian fundamentalism in this country who would like to speed the second coming of the Messiah by continuing the support unconditional for Israel and having to exaggerate Islamic phobia. And I will say, if you want to speed the second coming of the Messiah, do it, but not on my expense or my people's expense. We need to be really raising a red flag about this kind of, and we see that nowadays in the Middle East, there are more groups talking about this type of religious state here, religious state there, and we go back to how many centuries, in the past, and we know when every group will think that God is created in their image, rather than we are created in the image of God, we understand that God becomes a tribal God or real estate agent God or cheerleader for war. We need to work with religious leaders, religious groups to, again, transform the use of religion from being a source of conflict to a resource for peace and coexistence and reconciliation. Having said that, well, we are not sure where are we heading. Are we heading to community building or chaos? And with all of that, we see that as if we are closed and very close to chaos. It's not so gloomy at all. There are still hopes, and there are many reasons for hope. And I'd like to address that before I open the floor for questions, because many people say we are tired to hear about the negative things. Are there any positive things? And sometimes you wonder what to say, but at the same time, hope is the thing that keeps us going, and hope is a form of nonviolent struggle for us that gives us the power and the strength to continue in this less traveled road, because what's going on there needs another way to relate to. And I start with hope, having people like you to come to this meeting today to hear about this issue from different walks of life, from different political, social, religious backgrounds, is a sign that people are concerned about the situation. And with the delegations that today, with the Peace Corps, with the Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility, different groups coming to the Middle East, show that people are concerned, and sometimes they take risk, and And I know how many of you received calls or emails to say, don't go there. It's very dangerous, and people have been killing each other there for a long time. You are not going to fix it by a few days. I know that, but I commend your courage to come and visit. And since we talk about Christmas, we say there is room in the inn. Come and visit and stay with the Palestinians. Come to listen to Israelis and Palestinians. We need your voice. We need your prophetic voice. We need your prophetic action. That's very important to see more of you coming to that area, because it gives hope, and also you are giving another weight of dialogue of cultures and religions that are needed nowadays than any time. And it is a response to those who believe in the war of fundamentalism or clashes of civilizations. So it is very important. And also another source of hope, as I mentioned, the Israeli peace camp, and I hope that the peace camp in Israel will be more a movement as it was in 1982 and after that. So to have a peace movement that will influence the Israeli government, Israeli foreign policy, to come to terms to end occupation. Because occupation doesn't demoralize me as a Palestinian, but also demoralizes Jews as a burden to the Israelis and the Jewish community in the world. And many times I listen to many Israeli activists like Jeff Helber and others, or lately I was reading something about Shifting Sands, a booklet of for 14 women Israelis who are couldn't stand and be silent about the situation. And I would like to read a quotation for Starhawk, which says, "Those who love Israel need to stand with her true interest now by demanding an end to the occupation, an end to the siege of Gaza, the dismantling of the settlements, restitution and real justice. These are the preconditions that will lead to security and peace." Look at this voice, to call things by their names. And ending the occupation will save the soul of Israel in a way or another. So we need the peace movement in Israel to be more on the ground and to be active and to create a change in the policy, not for the sake of Palestinians, but for the sake of Israelis. The third type of hope is, as a humble student of history, who says the apartheid regime in South Africa will be dismantled. That doesn't mean there is justice, high level of justice 100%, but there has been a change. Who says Berlin Wall will be falling? Berlin Wall fell down. And it's shame on us to see that another wall is built recently in the land that should really disseminate the peace message to the world. But definitely the wall will fall one time. And of course, we talk about Northern Ireland, that the Republicans and the loyalists are sharing the government. So there are signs of change in the world. Why the leaders there in Israel are procrastinating and delaying the inevitable. The inevitable that we are going to live together no matter, whether one-state solution or two-state solution. That the Palestinians and Israelis are destined to live together. So we should speed up this inevitability and stop the procrastination, whether through peace talks, whether through influencing the peace accords and so on. And I believe at the end, there are many signs of hope that's happening within the Palestinian society, that we are, yes, we are in big prisons and small prisons. We are more organizing ourselves. We are investing more in education and building the infrastructure, doing better job at home, not yet 100% satisfactory, but people are happy to have better conditions, to celebrate life again. They value life, despite the fact that anytime Israeli helicopters or tanks could destroy all of that. But there is a determination from our people to build institutions, to create a democracy, to separate the powers, and to move forward. There is improvement of human security there in the last 2 years, better than previously. And this is a sign of hope. And we like to have strong opposition, very civilized opposition. We need to create more the unity among ourselves, the diversity, to celebrate the differences among ourselves, because this way that will lead to peace, justice, coexistence, or reconciliation. I'm not naive to say hope, this kind of hope will tomorrow end the occupation. I'm at the same time, I wouldn't like to surrender to pessimism. Neither I am optimistic. I am cautiously hopeful. And hope could be concrete if it is coupled with action as well as collective responsibility. And we are all called to assume our collective responsibility. Thank you very much. Well, we am as a grassroots organization, and I believe myself in multi-track diplomacy. And sometimes we are not able to address the issue on that level. We are trying, instead of cursing darkness, to light a humble candle. And was created as a result of lighting a humble candle to help the people, not in conflict resolution per se. Yes, I'm interested in resolving conflicts, but it's not enough. We like to transform people's life. And we have programs for kids, for youth, for women, for men, for the entire community, to embark on civic education, to have workshops on nonviolence, conflict resolution, conflict transformation. We have programs for kids on trauma coping. I don't call it trauma healing yet because we don't have the post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a layer after layer over layer of trauma. And I believe at least 70% of our kids in the West Bank are traumatized. In Gaza, I believe 100% are traumatized. And one symptom or another here and there, the whole community is a hostage for trauma, if you'd like to say. I believe in Israel and Palestine, both are exhausted of the conflict, but on the Palestinian side, there is no home, is not touched by occupation, affected by the occupation. So we try to alleviate the suffering of the people by our modest means. We have programs, all interrelated field and interdisciplinary, and we work also with women. And we work with women to empower them and to create gender sensitivity issues, and to create, that all people could really contribute to building a state towards democracy. We work to influence the separation of the powers together with other NGOs in the camps, in the villages, in the cities, because we want to live. And this is where we work in different circles, because we are a community-based society and the family is a viable socioeconomic unit. And we believe in dialogue of cultures and religions. That's why we are also involved in citizen diplomacy, where we host groups coming to the area, whether to design a program or itinerary for them according to their professional or their interest, to have them stay overnight with the Palestinian homes and to meet with Palestinians from different perspectives, different fields, as well as we have other partner organizations to help us or to ourselves to organize meetings with the peace camp in Israel and different programs here and there. Israel should withdraw from the occupied territories, should implement the UN resolutions. There should be no question about that. And the Palestinians have been really looking at the issue of withdrawal from the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem as a potential, possible relative justice. And I don't think the Palestinian could go less than that, you know. Always our struggle have been accommodationist, and now we accept to build our state in 22.7% of the historic land. And this is a message that every Israeli, every person in the world should really acknowledge. And what we are asking is the implementation of your resolutions. And the person says Israel should get out of the occupied territories. I fully support, because it helps Israel, you know, more than only helps the Palestinians, and should be a fair solution for the refugee problem. And we talk about all the package deal, releasing the prisoners and so on, and to have a viable Palestinian state. I don't want to have a state of mind. Yes, we have it for a long time. We want a concrete state that we feel there is a safe haven for us, that our kids could and our youth could really be educated, nourished in a wonderful place, to have a place for work, as well as to think of, you know, health, to have a good health system. This is what we are aiming as Palestinians. We are not asked to have weapons of mass destruction or to have a belligerent state. We want to live just humbly, to live in our own land with dignity, to have access to travel, to import, to export, the basic needs of the Palestinian people, of any people in the world. So whether she asked or anyone asked to go to Poland, I believe maybe she is asking to organize trips to go abroad rather than anything else. I don't know, to be frank with you, but I would like to invite them to come to the area and see it. And when they see it, they should really, going back to the essence of the Christian message, if you are talking about the churches, which is a solidarity with the oppressed, with, I would call it, the Nazareth Manifesto. I came to bring good news, to release the captives, to feed the hungry. And this is the essence of the Christian value. I was listening today to Congress Jim McDermott with the message of Christ. And so when we talk about Christmas, you are talking about the message that aligned itself with the underprivileged, with poor people, with the oppressed, with people who suffer. So I think, or Amos, the prophet Amos, what they says, what the Lord required from thee, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. If you talk about to do justice, what does mean justice? Talking about justice for all people, to let them live and let others live. And of course, this is a message that need to be heard not only from Christian voices, but Muslim voices, Jewish voices, and of course, all of it will focus on the occupation that's evil, is against any human dignity, is against the essence of any religion, which calls that every human life is valuable and we need to protect the human lives. And I hope the churches could go back to the essence of the message of Christ, especially nowadays in Christmas, to remind us with the prophetic voice of the church. You know, if you talk about the Middle East, you talk about tradition, history, myth, religion, all together are mixed. But I like to see religion as a resource of peace and not a source of conflict. And there have been, you know, during the history that some practices of religion considered part of the conflict, rather than conflict producers, rather than resolving conflicts. I am for the separation of church and state, and at the same time, I believe religious teachings, in a way or another, should focus on issues of morality to help people to see the light in terms of relationship between people, to celebrate the differences, not to entice or incite others to be anti-others because they are different in their religion, in their theology, in their doctrine. So we need to see a different reality in that sense. Yes and no. I believe the Palestinians are clear that they want Israel to withdraw from all the occupied territories and to have contiguous state, viable state, and to control our own resources. And we talked about that we are accommodationists in our struggle. We accepted the 22% at this moment. You know? And if there is a viable state and the Palestinians could be in control of the borders or all of the thorny issues with Jerusalem, East Jerusalem as the capital, and to be both Jerusalem to be open and people have free access with a fair solution to the refugee problem. I believe the Palestinians have made it clear on the different issues. But the problem on the Israeli government now, which is more right-wing government, they like to have the cake and eat it at the same time. They don't want to have peace for land, land for peace formula. They want peace for peace. And this is not easy. And they don't want to tackle the issue of the refugee problem. They don't talk about safe corridor between Gaza and West Bank at this moment. So if there is no viable Palestinian state, I believe many voices among Palestinians are calling for one secular binational state.
Doesn't that make sense?
And this time, I don't think so, because so far we are not able to control what we should control and to live freely in that area. And we see in the Israeli side more voices to a Jewish state, even not only excluding the Palestinians who live in the West Bank, also to find ways to kick the Palestinians inside 1948, inside Israel. And I believe most Palestinians are talking about two-state solution, to have safe haven for Palestinians, to be in coexistence with Israelis. And in the future, if they want to have one state, both people, confidence building measures, things like that. If we want to go to practical solution in the long run, one state solution. That's in the meantime, because I believe the Palestinians are in a no-win situation. If they now talk about secular, democratic, binational state, there will be more voices say, you see, the Palestinians want to dismantle the Israeli state, to end the Israeli state, and so on. And the whole atmosphere in the world really preparing for two-state solution. Well, that's what we hope, to move in the positive direction, to end all the suffering, to let people live. And this is what we are working for. And at the same time, things are much more complicated, and it's not easy to analyze. And there are lots of deep suffering there. Lots of laws are enacted. I'd like to comment a few words on the Holocaust. I know as a Palestinian, when I want to tackle this issue, many Israeli friends don't dare to talk about it. And I'd like just to remind that we are the indirect victims of the Holocaust. Yeah. We are the victims of the victims, and there is no way to deny the Holocaust, as some folks might, but at the same time, as a Palestinian, as an Arab, we are paying the price of it. And I believe this is the time to think of all the sufferings of the people and to be inclusive without minimizing any suffering of one group or national group or religious group. And it's not to put equality on the sufferings here and there, but we talk about the First Nation people in America, the Afro-Americans, the Armenians, we are talking about, and we hope to be liberated in a way or another and to say never again, not to Jews only, but to other nations and other faiths.
Amen.
Always there are hopeful people. And there are many people who are potential leaders, and some of those potential leaders were liquidated or put in prison or deported. One of them is Marwan Barghouti, who is in the Israeli prisons for a long time, and we should really have a world campaign to release him, because he's a man of integrity. He likes to work for justice and peace and so on. Yes, there are pitfalls in our own political issues. We should look at ourselves in the mirror, but at the same time, we should call things by their names and not to focus on blaming the victim. The occupation is the evil, and Israel should withdraw from all the occupied territories and let the Palestinians control their lives. And we will embark on education, on different things. And we see, as I mentioned, lots of positive things happening, and we need to increase them. We need to foster this kind of positivity. We need to have dialogue among ourselves, because it's very important. We talk about diversity and unity, and we talk about dialogue with others. Why not to have it? I believe West Bank and Gaza should be, again, under one control. East Jerusalem be part of this political entity, and to work towards that. There are lots of exaggeration, in demonizing the Palestinian people. It started with the PLO, and there was a prefix for us. Either we are terrorists or fundamentalists or extremists. Now Fatah becomes on this side. The demonization is happening to the Muslim groups, Islamic groups, and now they are called extremists and fundamentalists. And I believe we do some mistakes too. I believe the rockets that are launched from Gaza shouldn't be, because strategically, politically, besides our principle of nonviolence, they shouldn't be part of it. President Abbas always called them the pipes, because say stop them, because I am one of those who belong to a group who would like to deprive Israel from an enemy, because I believe in the nonviolent struggle, and many Palestinians now are conducting nonviolent struggle in different pockets of nonviolence in the West Bank, in different villages, and here and there. The president, the prime minister, many factions are calling for nonviolent struggle, or what we call an armed struggle against the occupation. Even Hamas is ready to sign a truce for a long time. So in a way or another, favoring dialogue, favoring political negotiation, and the using of. And now I don't think there are more rockets from Gaza. Hamas is more caring for Gaza, and the situation in the West Bank is really not only the Palestinian Authority is controlling the situation. The Israeli troops could come anywhere in the West Bank without a question. So I feel the ball is in the Israeli playground now and in the international community. Whether we push the Palestinians to go on that line, and I prefer that the dialogue and the negotiation that will end in peace accords between not only Israel and Palestine, but between Israel and the Arab world. And the Arabs are really talking again about the Arab peace plan, that they are committed, and they will talk about normalization after Israel withdrawal from the occupied territories. I don't think there is much more reasonable voice than nowadays, whether from the Arab League or from the Palestinian leadership. So this is where I see the situation, and hopefully that it will lead to that, and that will not go in the right direction without some pressure on Israel. It is a hard question, and I'm thinking the issue of the borders is very important.
Yes.
I don't know, I can't predict if the Palestinian leadership will declare the Palestinian state, what is the border will be, going to 47 or not. When we talk about recognition of the state of Palestine by 93 states, talking about 1967 border. So maybe we'll go back to the 181 partition, the Security Council resolution on partition. And so the Palestinian declaration is an attempt, a cry to the world that we cannot wait more. This is how I look at it. We cannot wait. We have been pushed to the point that we accepted this. Don't push us more. Are you ready to assume this collective responsibility? And declaring the state that Palestine should be part of the United Nations in a way or another, and the United Nations should take over the responsibility in taking care of the Palestinians. In case that the Palestinian leadership say, I cannot go on with the peace talks with Israel, you need to be responsible. Israel as occupying force should be responsible, and probably, I don't know what will be the ramifications or repercussions of declaring the state, whether Palestine be a part of the Arab League, what does it mean to be, again, there will be Arab solidarity to more on the regime level as well as the people's. I don't know what that package will have in declaration of the state. I'm not in a position to talk more about it because I'm not aware of what will be the result of that. Thank you for the question. It is another picture of the conflict. I myself believe in the conflict is based on political conflict, not religious conflict. And those who would like to keep the conflict on the ground, there are many people who benefit from it. The multinational corporations, the arms deal. These are easy answers to what is the question, but whether, and we see sometimes religious fervor is used to foment and create more strife in the conflict. Building the temple, there are some right-wing Christian groups, and there are the right-wing Israeli Jewish groups who believe that building the third temple will speed up the second coming of the Messiah. And I wouldn't say that. and this is not, for my own conviction, is not healthy. I believe it is the time to respect all people from different faiths and from different religions, and to keep the status quo in the religious places. And if anyone wants to build a temple, build it in his or her heart to prepare the second coming of the Messiah, rather than to create more enmity and more people to die. I believe this is a good question for those who visited Gaza and saw the reality there. With this policy of siege, of course, there is malnutrition among children in Gaza. It is genocide. It is.
There's no doubt about it. It's definitely.
And if you read Jeff Halber talking about impose a diet on the Palestinians, how much calories that the siege in Gaza happened. And I'd like to hear some of those who have been in Gaza would like to comment on that, because I haven't been to Gaza myself in the last 10 years, because we are not allowed to, that saw the poverty, they saw the malnutrition, the sicknesses of the children, and the trauma, in the West Bank, there is this, different policy, because the West Bank is bigger and it's not easy to control as in Gaza. Whether it is a policy of the state or not, these are the outcomes of what the occupation. This is the price of being under occupation. The stress-related sicknesses, for example, is on the rise. I see young people, even children, have diabetes and blood pressure, kidney problems, heart problems, cancer. So it is increasing. The stress that we live in push people to be less healthy. The food, the chemicals that are used there. Some people talk about what you call it, depleted uranium. You know, some of the white phosphorus in Gaza. What will be the impact of that? Or some of the weapons that are used in the West Bank, manufactured in the 50s or in the 20s or in the 30s, are used now. I couldn't prove that they have depleted uranium or not, but I can see the impact on the people's health, which is deteriorating. The ratio of the Palestinians who have diabetes in the occupied territories, if you compare it to the Israeli Jews, big difference, maybe 7 or 8 times, you know. And so it is, occupation is not healthy at all. I believe, first of all, we all agree about the inalienable rights of the Palestinians, no matter what kind of struggle. For me, I believe in nonviolence. And I see that nonviolence has the future there because, first of all, from a strategic point of view, you cannot really have a stone versus, you know, rockets or tanks or airplanes. I feel some Palestinians also would say, you know, don't dream. This is a romantic view. If the Prime Minister will be Gandhi, and the Minister of Religion will be Martin Luther King, and the Social Minister will be Mother Teresa, the Israeli will not move forward in the peace talks. But despite of that, we are talking about, we opt for nonviolence, and we hope that nonviolence will be a struggle that will be adopted by the Palestinians in general. And there are more signs that, besides I mentioned the leadership as calling for that, the 6 Fatah conference that held in Bethlehem, which is Fatah, the mainstream of the PLO, talked about different types of struggle and focusing on the popular struggle, on the nonviolent movement. And there are different factions on the PLO also calling now for nonviolent struggle. And the nonviolent struggle has been one way of the struggle that the Palestinians have opted since the 20th century, early 20th century. And we have been using it. And I give a ratio of 90% of our struggle, just a small percentage that the media captured and magnified it. And we see now pockets of nonviolent struggle all over the West Bank, and even in Gaza. I would consider the tunnels themselves as a form of nonviolent struggle to break the siege and bring food to the people and medicine from Gaza, from Egypt to Gaza, and so on. I see the farmers who go to their orchards in the West Bank and sacrifice themselves and put themselves on the risk as part of the nonviolent struggle. The students who move from the south to go to Bir Zayt or Jenin universities. A trip should be 2 hours, it become 1 hour, and they are determined to continue their trip to invest in the education as form of nonviolent struggle. Lately, Cairo's document by the churches in Palestine who carry weight have opted for the nonviolent struggle and talking about the nonviolent struggle. The Palestinian NGOs and different factions who call for the BDS. For me, BDS is a form of nonviolent struggle, you know? The emphasis on the political route of negotiations and the dialogue is also another form of nonviolent struggle. So the atmosphere is there, but we know from past historical facts and events that the people struggle nonviolently is not enough to make it successful. We need also a response from the world to support this. And we saw it that collective responsibility was at work in ending the apartheid regime in South Africa. So the black Africans were struggling, the peace camp and the Africano supporting the world, and the BDS was effective or in different ways. So in a way or another, to make nonviolent struggle more successful in Palestine, we need the Israeli peace activism dimension, and we need the world dimension. In that, we need the prophetic voices of the faith communities, as well as the secular, humanistic also groups we need, again, a witness of collective responsibility. I believe this is, you have described it very well. The majority of the Palestinians, even long ago, when they used to chant PLO occupation no. Earlier they were talking PLO Israel no, but this first Intifada talked about PLO occupation no. And nowadays they say, yes, we are struggling to end the occupation. And all of what we hear about driving Israel into the sea is really old rhetoric that the media used to be anti-Palestinian. And I hope that we should have a closure about it. And we should look at nowadays that the Palestinians are more ready, in respect to their political groups, to talk about ending the occupation, to build their state, viable state in the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and to move forward rather than to be stuck in the history. Thank you for your points of view. I believe it should be addressed again on different levels, on political level, economic, social, health levels. I believe you read about the implication of the sewage of the settlements on the Palestinian village, what happened. And the Palestinian Authority is not allowed to treat the sewage, right, because, still A, B, C, or areas that maybe we have to collect the sewage in it are not able to deal with it because everything is under the Israeli control. And we shouldn't kid ourselves. When we talk about the Palestinian Authority is still not in control, neither of the land nor of the people. If a child is born to a Palestinian family, it should be registered in the Israeli computer before the Palestinian computer. The passports that we have, yes, Palestinian Authority passports, but we are not allowed to travel unless the Israeli approve it. So everything is still under control. But I believe many Palestinians are talking, yes, we need such joint projects, but first of all, the occupation should be ended and we should deal state to state. And there are lots of discussion about that. Some Palestinians said, no, we shouldn't wait. We should do that even before we are liberated. But the majority and the voice is calling ending the occupation and all of these joint ventures for issues of education, for issues of environmental issues about health to be more crowned after the withdrawal of the Israeli occupation. They have done a lot. And lots of statements issued by the religious leaders, Islamic, Christian, and if we talk about Palestinian Israeli, some voices from rabbis for human rights and Jewish faith peace groups also sent to the world to ask them, to find ways to end the occupation. Probably we need more of these voices, but we need responses to such calls from the world leaders in all areas. 5 million Palestinians are refugees now, right, out of 10. And many of them are living in a bleak situation in the area, in our land, as well in diaspora. And there has been resolution acknowledging the right of Palestinians and the right of Palestinians to return and compensation. There is collective right and individual right. And I believe this right should be acknowledged by the Israeli government. Now, whether the Palestinians want to go back or not, this is their right to decide. And the Palestinian leadership now is using, or the Palestinians at large using, fair solution is to be more practical in a way. For me, I believe Israel should acknowledge it. And the Palestinians should practice it, what are the numbers, this is part of the peace talks. The other point, when we emphasize the right of return, there is a law of return issued in Israel in 1950, which gives the right for any person who claims that her or his grandparents or Jewish could come and live in any part of Israel and Palestine. And this law hasn't been revoked. So the Palestinians, when they talk about fair solution to the refugees, is a way not to block any peace talks about this issue. And many, whether, because there might be an Israeli say, if you talk about 55 million Palestinians will go back to the 500 villages that leveled, what will happen in the demographic issue? So the Palestinians are more pragmatic in dealing with the issue. And of course, no one has the mandatory to concede on this issue. There should be a voting on it on the Palestinian level. What do we mean and what is the aim of it? But at least we would like to practice this right to let the Palestinian refugees come to the land that we proclaim as a Palestinian state. In the meantime, I believe building and expanding settlements is going on, no matter what is the rate of occupancy there. There are certain areas around Jerusalem, if you take the term Greater Jerusalem, the occupancy is very high. But in remote settlements, the occupancy 30-40%. And of course, we talk about religious, ideological settlers, and there are settlers who are interested to take the package deal of the economy, cheap houses, high allowances, tax-free, all of these benefits. But at the end, all settlements are illegal, and they shouldn't continue with building the settlements and expanding the settlements, because always settlements are blockage for any peace process. I give you an example. Where I live, there is a settlement called Har Gilo, which used to be very few hundred, 400, 300 settlers. And they are talking about having 4,000 now. And they talk about, if you remember at the time of the freezing of the settlement, they talk about natural growth. And maybe one of you could explain what does mean natural growth in that sense. So there is a lot of misleading information about settlements and building the settlements. And the whole idea is really to Judaize the Palestinian territories. What is the remnant of Palestine in the West Bank? I'll give you another example. There are 23 settlements around Bethlehem with a population of 87,000. 87,000. Yeah. Har Homa, Tekoa settlement, Efrat, Daniel, Al-Azar, and all of that. And we're talking about population of 180,000. But 87% of the land of Bethlehem Governorate is under the Israeli control. What does it mean in the coming 10 years if the peace process failed, if Israel determined to have more settlers there? For me, it doesn't matter if it is ideological settler or secular settler. He is taking my land and taking my water and creating unhealthy future for my children. And also, in the long run, for the Jewish children, will create more conflicts rather than. I believe many Palestinians will say, if Israelis, Jews would like to come to live in Palestine, they can live as Palestinians in that land, not to be above the law and to take things by force. The Israeli government has always supported the settlements, whether Labour or Likud or Kadima. And give you an example, who is protecting the 400 settlers in the heart of Hebron? There are 1,200 soldiers. Whose soldiers are there? Israeli state. So, sometimes the Israeli government would like to disassociate itself from the settlers as if it is a movement by itself, but it has been the policy of Israel, whether Labour or Likud, to continue to build more settlements, to create more facts on the ground. And I hope that one time the Israeli will say, wait a minute, the Israeli people. Those settlers are not only creating bitter facts for the Palestinian and creating unhealthy situation for the Palestinian taking the land, but also for the average Israeli, because most of the money for security is on the Israeli settlers, and more money is spent in building these settlements, and the average Israeli is not benefiting from the whole system.
But that money's coming from us.
Well, question your authority and see what can you do to stop the tax money at work.